began in 1974. It stands for the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act of 1974, and some people may be familiar with it as the Buckley Amendment.
FERPA ensures 4 rights to students: that they can inspect their record, they can amend their record, they can give consent to disclose their record, and they can file a complaint.
FERPA essentially would protect any and all records and make them confidential. Nevertheless, who has the right to them is not quite as simple as I think sometimes we believe.
I can discuss student information with those that have a legitimate right to know. For advising purposes, campus community needs to know a student's schedule or possibly their transcript and prior performance in courses that might be a prereq to the one that they're signing up for.
And we work on what would be called a need-to-know basis. I look upon the day-to-day operations of the college.
Schools must also notify students annually and keep records of requests for disclosure. As defined by FERPA, a student is a person in attendance at the school, regardless of age, as well as any person who has previously attended the school. This means that not only are current attendees protected by this act, but previous students as well. There are many different forms of records you will have to work with. There are paper records, microfiche records, and computerized records. Your individual job will determine which kind of record you will use the most. The next question you may be asking yourself is, what is this FERPA thing protecting? What information can or can't I give out? FERPA says that educational records are to be protected.
And it's probably easier to describe what is not an educational record rather than describe what an educational record is. So law enforcement records are not a part of a student's educational record. Health service records, whether they are from a physician, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or one of their paralegals, are not considered educational records. Files or records that are made by one single individual that aren't shared or accessed by other individuals are not considered part of an educational record. Just about everything else would be considered an educational record.
Certain information, called directory information, can be given out to anyone unless the student requests non-disclosure of this information.
Directory information would include a student's name, previous institutions they've attended, their major, honors they have awarded, participation in college activities or athletics, their height and weight, photographs, and hometown.
While directory information can be released to anyone, it is important to note that students have the right to protect their records, including their directory information if they so choose.
Students have the right to request non-disclosure of information, and primarily that would be directory information because that's what FERPA allows institutions to release at any time without a student's permission.
A student can request to have all information withheld by completing a form in our office.
Disability-related issue is absolutely confidential, and no one has the right to that other than the individual, and the individual chooses how much to disclose. And I would say we would sit very tightly on that kind of information.
But for reporting purposes, and also if members of the college community need to know information about, for instance, their majors, their minors, GPAs, then that information actually will be released to them because they have a legitimate educational interest in that information.
Not only is there certain information that can and cannot be disclosed, but there are also only certain people who can get information about a student for certain reasons.
FERPA allows each institution to develop their own list or qualifications for directory information.
I'm not allowed to disclose information, academic information, to anyone outside of the academic community.
I am authorized to disclose directory information about a student, and also if any kind of reports for reporting purposes inside or outside of the college need to have any information disclosed about that student, I'm also allowed to give out that information.
One of the rules of FERPA you'll have to be especially aware of is the fact that parents do not have a right to students' records unless the student gives them permission.
Parents have no inherent right to access a student's educational record once the student has entered post-secondary education.
And a lot of parents have a hard time with that because they're paying the bills.
The student has to provide a release for any of that information to be discussed with a parent.
Otherwise, parents can only obtain directory information.
Depending on what job you have, whether faculty or staff, there's a different amount of the student's records that you will need to access.
For my individual job as sort of the custodian of records at the college, I have access to any piece of it, of a student's educational record. Other people on campus, it can vary considerably as to what they have access to.
I need limited access to their academic records, and in fact, on my computer, I don't have access to everything that they would have access to in other offices on campus.
I need access to a lot of information in order to do my job. From the time that a student's admitted, I receive the biographical information, their name, their address, their assigned email, their transfer information, placement, scores.
Although, most faculty and staff will not need to use this much of a student's record. Any violation of FERPA can result in action from the federal government. This action can vary depending on the number of offenses and/or the severity of the offense.
The Family Compliance Board oversees institutions' compliance with FERPA, and the big stick that they carry is that federal funds that support financial aid can be taken away from an institution where they feel is truly in violation of FERPA.
I've rarely encountered FERPA problems in terms of a staff member or professor violating students' privacy rights, in some ways coming afoul of FERPA.
Information on FERPA must be made available to both students and staff so that it is possible for everyone to know what the students' rights are regarding their records. Knowledge of FERPA is important in order to do your job. There are certain records that you can release to certain people, but it is perhaps easier to look at things you can avoid. Here's some examples of specific things you should avoid doing in order to comply with FERPA.
Using the student's identification number or social security number as we're posting grades or any kind of class information.
Link the student's identification number or ID number in any kind of public manner.
Leave papers or tests in a pile.
Circulate a printed class list with student ID number, name, and/or grades.
Discussing attendance or any student information with anyone other than the student.
Give out your class roster to anyone for commercial purposes.
Providing contact information, schedule, phone number, even email to anybody who is not clearly authorized to have that information.
Leave confidential information on a printer, copy machine, fax machine, or desk where any individual can view this information.
Release any non-directory information to anyone over the phone unless we're certain that we're speaking with the student himself or herself.
While it is important to know what you can and can't give out, and to whom, the best way to comply with FERPA is, when in doubt, don't hand it out. If you are unsure if you can disclose something, it is best to say no and check with either the Registrar's Office or the Office of Academic Affairs.
When in doubt, don't give it out.